All right, everybody. Let's talk Warrior. So, Warrior's not too bad. The opener is going to be pretty straightforward, and your rotation, very little priority to it. So basically, how you're going to start the pull is you have two options. You could either Tomahawk in with your ranged GCD, or you could just run straight up and heavy swing. The bosses are such big hitboxes nowadays, and the pull range so short that most of the time you're just going to like sprint and run in with a heavy swing. So we'll go ahead and do that. If not, you could just throw the Tomahawk in before. Basically, the way it's going to work is we're going to do a heavy swing. We're going to pop our Infuriate. We're going to maim. We use our potion. We're going to Storm's Eye. And then we're going to go into Inner Release. That's going to cover in Inner Chaos, Infuriate, Inner Chaos, Primal Rend, a couple of Fell Cleaves, while weaving in our Upheaval and Onslaughts in between. Finish out a Storm's Path combo. Get our Fell Cleave into another Inner Chaos, and then Storm's Eye. And then it's basically just building gauge, using this button on cooldown, using your Fell Cleaves before you'd overcap, and you want to save 3 onslaughts for your 2-minute burst, 1 onslaught during the 1-minute burst. If you use 2 and 2, it's really not a big deal. It's just small potency increases with raid buffs. And then if you could save Infuriates for your burst windows, that'd be great too. So let's get into it. It's not really going to be that bad. There we go. We'll put a 10-second counter. And remember, we are going to use our potion after the maim. So run in heavy swing, get our Infuriate. You could Voke here too if you're the main tank, because why wouldn't you? That way you have it on cooldown, and the other tank, if they started with their tank stance on, isn't going to be looking that bad. Now, the order that you use these buttons in at the beginning doesn't really matter. Like you saw, I just did a Primal Rend before the Inner Chaos. It doesn't matter. As long as they're all in raid buffs, that's all that's important. The rest is fluff. We get our Storm's Path going up. We're going to put a Fell Cleave, Infuriate, Inner Chaos. And then from here, we'll get our Storm's Eye going. Because you're lazy! Okay, listen. So, that guy can't crit his Fell Cleaves worth a damn. So from here, yeah, we're just doing our priority system. And if Storm's Eye falls below 30 seconds, which is your Surging Tempest buff, I'm always going to call it Storm's Eye. It's what it is. Then you could refresh it. It adds 30 seconds to the timer when you put up Storm's Eye. We're going to enter our 1-minute burst soon. So here we go. If you don't really have raid buffs anymore, but if you were to have them, you could min-max this by saving your gauge going into it, which is what I'm going to do here. And I only used 1 onslaught. Again, if you use 2 here, it's not the end of the world. Saving gap closes for mechanics as well, not a bad idea. And while you're mitigating attacks, typically people ask, "Hey, Rin, what do you use on tank busters when you're coming up on them? How do I know when to use a lot of cooldowns, or is it okay to just press Bloodwetting because I'm super lazy?" You know, people ask that all the time as well. And the answer really is that I should have actually saved an Infuriate from before and I didn't. You can alternate them. It depends on the fight. But typically speaking, you can alternate. You can use Rampart with Thrill of Battle and Bloodwetting on a buster. And then you can do Vengeance with Bloodwetting on another buster. Or if you're getting hit by both tanks, then you can use Nascent Flash on your co-tank because that would be advantageous. So here we're going to go into our window. There's our 3 Infuriates. You can get your Primal Rend going. Raid buffs are definitely up by now. You're going to get your Inner Chaos. And then you're going to get another Inner Chaos, and by now raid buffs are done. And you could refresh your Storm's Eye. Putting a Storm's Path up there and then a Storm's Eye after might drop your Storm's Eye buff. And there would be no advantage to it because you're not going to have the gauge that you need to do another Fell Cleave. No advantage. Yeah, you could do your Voke later. If you're the off tank, you could do your Voke anytime when it's time for tank swap. You could turn your stance on later. Now that they have added the ability to turn your stance off with this button, you know, now that they've added compliance, that kind of sucks, right? Because it is possible to clip your weaves, at least for me. And I'll show you that in a second. You might not have that issue when you're trying to triple weave with turning your stance off. I do. And maybe it'll vary. Before this change happened, I actually did clip sometimes. There aren't really too many situations where you have to turn your stance off while you're weaving. Warrior is pretty straightforward, doesn't have a whole lot of weaves. But sometimes it'll happen. So let's say I wanted to do mid, That clipped my GCD. That clipped my GCD. Not the end of the world. It is more important to stay alive and keep a run going than it is to do your damage. But if you can map things out in advance, you're like, hey, look, a buster's coming. Let me pop Thrill of Battle for this buster that's going to hit in now 6 seconds. Ready? So the buster's going to hit in 3 seconds. Buster hits you. Now you can even shake it off of an AoE's coming on after, and it gets buffed by that Thrill of Battle that you used, plus the Bloodwetting. And that's pretty cool. So here, we have 80 gauge. We have one more Fell Cleave coming up. So we're going to over cap this gauge by a few seconds. We lose like 2 seconds on the gauge. That's not the end of the world either. The reason I'm showing that is because you're going to have that happen. It's going to happen at some point. So how do you manage it? You just deal with it. Warrior is pretty straightforward. It's not that bad. You lose a gauge here and there. It doesn't matter. If you end the fight anywhere between 10 and 40 gauge, you haven't lost anything, because basically if you would end the fight on 10 to 40, then it's a wash, right? It's only when you would end on the even 100 or the 50 and you've lost it that it would become a problem. Warrior, not too bad. Reasons you would bring it into raid. Home Gang has a shorter cooldown than the other invulns, so it's going to be better for you in fights where you can squeeze an extra use, but you will want to make a macro that targets yourself with Home Gang, because if you walk away from this enemy and try to use Home Gang, it doesn't just work. So if you make a macro that uses it on yourself, instead of your opponent, you'll have this happen. And now you've home ganged successfully. I've killed myself way too many times because I've gone to home gang and I've walked out of distance. That's why that macro now exists permanently on my hotbar. So in addition to that, things you would do: Nascent Flash as a buster is about to end, so that it mitigates the buster and heals you and your co-tank. Same with Bloodwetting. Or if you're not so healthy and you need to be before, you can Bloodwetting into the buster. Let's say you're missing some HP. And you need to be healed to full, or maybe, something's about to do a percentage of your max HP, right? What can you do? You could turn on Thrill of Battle, and then you could turn it off. You could also turn it on Equilibrium and turn it off. That way you get the extra heal. It increases your HP by 20%, and then you can click it off because it heals for that amount too, effectively just giving you a flat 20% heal, which is fantastic. Other things you could do, you can, if you have raid wides after, like I said, you shake it off to buckle into raid wides after you've taken a tank buster. It's really helpful. You'll be able to mitigate a lot of damage that way by min-maxing where you use what you use. The Vengeance can be used for physical damage returns, so if you can couple that on physical attacks as well as mitigating damage, you double up. That'd be really good for offense and defense. Beyond that, it's not really too big a deal. Warrior's good at having a good shield for people, which now has a regen as well as a flat heal, which is fantastic, and it works for old content as well. Whereas Dark Knight and Gunbreaker may be brought because they have percent mitigation with their Dark Missionary and their Heart of Light. Paladin has both because it has Passage of Arms as well as Divine Veil. And Warrior has a really good job at healing itself, but in terms of mitigation, all 4 tanks are relatively close enough now that they'll be able to kitchen sink pretty much anything, or alternate their 90s with their fluff cooldown being Thrill of Battle, Dark Mind, Bulwark, and Camouflage, and then alternating it with your 2 minutes. That's pretty much it for Warrior. I think you guys will get a good hang of it. It's not too bad. If there's any tips that you want to see about it, in terms of like saving gap closers, like maybe you use a gap closer, maybe you're doing Proto Carbuncle, and you're trying to do the uptime for the dashes, but Onslaught is too fast and is getting you hit. What you can do is you'd gap close to one side, and then say the gap close would get you hit, you can actually Primal Rend, and it takes a little bit longer to connect, giving you better uptime. Or walk towards the middle and use it. It's on the GCD, so the delay is going to be a little bit different. It's another really, really nice thing that you can use for distance closing. So you get the 3 gap closers plus Primal Rend, making it a 4th. Really nice. Who should main tank in a fight? It kind of depends on the fight, on the experience, on the gear of the player. But Warrior is an exceptional primary tank because it can heal itself. This Equilibrium is not able to be placed on your ally. However, Aurora is, Intervention is, and TBN and Oblation are. So Warrior is really, really good at holding aggro. Can't really do this healing if you're not taking damage. pretty much it for Warrior for me today. We've gone over Paladin pretty extensively lately. Paladin's rotation is pretty much priority system, unless you know that making an adjustment like the 60 loop, the 120 loop, the 240 loop, any of those adjustments, or like changing out Holy Spirits for Atonements for downtime, that's going to be fight specific. But beyond that, you really just want to do like the priority system, and it'll be fine. It'll work out. Warrior, keep in mind your potion reopener is going to be used at the 6-minute window with everybody else. You could do a 2-minute burst if a fight allows for it. Yo, Lars. And another thing that you can keep in mind is sometimes you might squeeze an extra primal rend in a fight, or an extra use of inner release by using it pre-pull. So you can begin a fight if you want it. I don't recommend this. It's a very niche thing if you're doing a very specific kill time or you're trying to squeeze extra damage and you know that you can. Basically, you could do like a pre-pull opener to primal rend into the pull, or to get your fell cleaves. Like, let's say I was not pulling the boss yet, and I was doing something like this, right? We'll even turn off our Storm's Eye. So we have the boss about to start, right? Here we go, 15 seconds. We're gonna get down to 12. You may recognize this pull, because this is something that you may do in P8 SP2. You'd start the fight, you just fell cleaves. You would have used an Infuriate, but I didn't have the extra charge, so now you do. Everybody's got their raid buffs up by this point. So that can net you an extra use of Primal Rend and some Fell Cleaves under IR before High Concept. Then you keep it on cooldown in P8 SP2, and you do extra damage, basically. I don't recommend it. It's something that you can do. I only recommend it if you know what you're doing, because if you make a mistake and you mess up, then you're going to lose damage. All right, now if you're really looking to min-max your damage, I'm going to show you how you can achieve peak performance with this one easy trick. Here you go. You ready for it? All you got to do is swap this with this. Congratulations. You're now dealing more damage than you'll ever deal with Warrior. Beyond that, though, keep watching this little guy, and if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be here next time. Will you?